Hi, it's Sari from Parent Plus. I'm just going to hang on and see if anyone's around. Um, if anybody is around or sees this, say hi, comment, or just press a little like or a heart or whatever so that I know that people are there and that you can hear me okay. So I'm just going to hang on for a minute or two. This is just a live that I promised I would do because I can see somebody's there, a few people are there. Oh, great, okay. This is a live that I promised I would do because yesterday and also over the last week or so we've had a lot of questions. I'm here, Parent Plus, Jackie. Oh, God, glad you could make it, Jackie Jones. A lot of questions about anxiety, and particularly anxiety in children. And it really saddens me when I see posts, particularly it seems that the children are getting much, much, much younger when they're experiencing anxiety. I don't think that particularly means that young children never used to, but I don't know, something about seems to be a lot of diagnosis of things. Maybe we're going and asking for help more, or I don't know, but it just seems quite young that children are being diagnosed with anxiety, or certainly parents are looking for help for their children with anxiety at quite a young age. So it's something I'm really passionate about. And so is Jackie, which is a lot of what we cover at Parent Plus. We had quite a few new people on our page yesterday, which is great. We love that because, we put quite a lot of effort into our blogs and the information that we share, and it's there for free. So it's really nice that we know that people are going to get to see it. So we do love and appreciate people that have tagged other people in, that are sharing the page and things like that, because it makes it worthwhile for us if it's actually reaching the people that we want to reach. So I'll just give a quick introduction to myself, because obviously if you're watching this you might not know who I am. I'm Sari Taylor and I'm one half of the duo of Parent Plus and Shift Happens. My colleague's Jackie Jones, who's online here and I'm sure will contribute if needs be. I run a private practice in psychotherapy and have done now for 5+ years. It's kind of changed and progressed over time. I work with children, adults, work with couples, teens, and also do coaching now as well. We do a lot of the online stuff that myself and Jackie do. So it's quite a mixed bag, which in a way is good because I think it kind of broadens our experience. So we're not just kind of saying, right, we're just therapists and this is what we do. We've done NLP, CBT. There's all sorts of different things that between myself and Jackie, we don't just think, oh, you stick with one therapy and that's that. We think the more tools, the better because, say CBT, for example, I've heard some people saying that it's absolutely rubbish and that they'll never do it again and it didn't help them, it made them feel worse. I've also heard other people say that CBT saved their life. So that really just shows how important when we're getting help and support it is that actually, although you want to ask other people and get recommendations and support, it's going to be quite unique to you or your child or whoever that wants that help. So you've got to kind of think what's right for you. And also sometimes you might try something, try a method, try a therapist, try a certain style, coaching, whatever it is, and try it. If it doesn't work, don't give up, keep going and go on to the next thing. So I said tonight that someone's just put there, this might help one of my friend's sons having a nosy. Oh, it's lovely to have you here, Catherine. Always like to see your smiley face. Yeah, no, that's good. And share it with her or tag her in or whatever. So kind of the theme for tonight is anxiety. If anyone's got any questions, please just give us a shout. Ask them on here. If you don't feel comfortable asking on here, you can private message afterwards. That's not a problem. One of the things that always strikes me about anxiety when we're talking about it for ourselves, and actually probably what I should have mentioned before, that the reason that I actually trained to be a psychotherapist in the first place is because I had a really severe acute episode of anxiety when I was around my mid-20s, to the point where I literally did not want to leave the house. I'd gone from seemingly very confident individual to having a complete breakdown basically. So I experienced in terms of being a therapist, but I also get it, and I know that my anxiety would be very different to someone else's, but I think when you experience anxiety that's that extreme, you can often really feel like people just can't possibly get it. So I'm kind of saying that to say that I do. I've been there. It's a horrible place to be, again, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing information and helping people for themselves and for the children really. So yeah, so one of the things that getting lots of likes for my anxiety, thanks guys. One of the things that does strike me is that there's a lot of talk often with children or with adults where it's like, oh, I need to stop being anxious. I need to get rid of this anxiety. How can I get rid of it? How can we fix it, kind of thing. Now, in one way, you're not going to get rid of anxiety completely because it's a normal feeling like anger, sadness, happiness, joy, excitement. But actually, there is a difference between feeling anxious about something that you know is quite rational versus feeling anxious on such a physiological level whereby it restricts you getting on with your day-to-day stuff, or it's restricting your child from getting on with what they want to get on. So there are different levels. So it's important to know we're not talking about eradicating anxiety completely, because that is impossible. And anybody that tells you that they can help you cure your anxiety so that you never have it again, I'm sorry, but that's just not the case. That's like saying, we will give you some anger management and you'll never feel angry again. Of course you will, but it's about being able to manage feelings in such a way that they don't completely take over your life and stop you doing the things that you want to do, basically. So the thing that I notice a lot is the dialogue around anxiety. Must get rid of it. I don't want to have it. It's awful. And it really is awful when you're feeling it to that intensity, whether it's you or watching your child go through it. It's hell. Like, honestly, I know I'm a bit biased because I've experienced it, but I don't think there's much worse, to be honest. So it is really difficult. So no wonder people go into that zone of, I need to get rid of it, I need to get rid of it. But in a way, we kind of need to switch the way that we think about it. So let me just kind of put something to you, that it's actually physically impossible for you or your children to feel panic or anxiety if they're relaxed. Okay. It's actually physically impossible, because when you're relaxed, your heart rate slows down. When you're anxious, your heart rate's going fast. So you can't be anxious with a slower heart rate. It's physically impossible. You could try, but you just can't. So rather than seeing it as we need to get rid of anxiety, want to get rid of anxiety, it can be quite helpful to reframe that, first of all. But, really simplistically, every time you find yourself or your child, however you kind of use your language with your child, whether they understand they've got anxiety or whether they don't, however it is they communicate it to you, it's turning it. And I'm not kind of saying, oh, let's make it all positive and it all goes away. That's not the case. But actually, often the words that we use can make a heck of a difference. So rather than focusing on being less anxious, it's really important that you start to change that and focus on being more relaxed. So, excuse me, I've got a bit of a tickle at the back of my throat. So if my daughter says to me, I'm stressing out, that's the words that she uses for me. Having a therapist at home as a mum is kind of good in some ways, but also she plays upon it and it's not always that helpful. So she will readily tell me exactly how she feels and take great pleasure in it because she knows it gets my attention. So she will often tell me that she feels stressy, or I'm just getting myself in a bit of a panic about it, and I know, and da-da-da. So I'll often say to her, what do you want instead? What needs to happen? Again, in a way for her to kind of be saying, I need to be more chilled. Because the minute we start to focus on something, we kind of get more of it. And I don't know anyone that's experienced anxiety, or if you've witnessed it with your child, what you might find is that the more anxious they are and the more they focus on that anxiety, it's like a cycle, and it feeds it and it feeds it and it goes and goes and goes. And so it's almost like trying to avoid it or trying to tackle it, but focusing massively on it. So the minute you change that and turn that into being more relaxed, okay, how are we going to be more relaxed? How are we going to together help you be more relaxed? Straight away, that can then become a bit more powerful than that anxiety. So think about the words that you're using. And almost sometimes what we're trying to ask of ourselves is like an impossible task, like to be less anxious, and like, well, how do we do that? Where do we start? And if we don't know, then it's almost like we're stuck already. Whereas actually, I'm pretty sure we can all come up with ways of being more relaxed, even if they're tiny little things. So we're giving ourselves a bit more of a chance to go at that. And actually, as I was saying before, you do that and you start to relax, or your child starts to relax, it's impossible for them to feel anxious. It's actually impossible. So focus more on being more relaxed rather than becoming less anxious, because it's a bit of a trap, really. Anxiety is a tricky, manipulative kind of feeling, really, and it can be a bit of a trap. You know, I talk to a lot of people who get in the situation where they're anxious about being anxious, and, you know, been there myself, and that's what will happen with your children, partly because they don't fully understand it. They just become sort of fearing the it, which is the anxiety. So let's start reframing that it, as in the it you're after is the more relaxed bit, rather than stopping that anxiety. So that's one thing I wanted to say. Sorry, I think it's gone now. Which sounds really simplistic and think, well, how's that going to help anxiety? But it will. It's about repetitively reframing. So same with any kind of issues with your children, you can use that really. Like if they're focusing on the negative, like find out from them what they want to be feeling or doing instead. So I've jotted some down stuff here because some people have asked some questions. One thing I just wanted to mention just quickly is if anybody is looking for help from a therapist or a life coach or whoever it is, any organisation, please check out their qualifications. And I'm not saying that to scare you. And any therapist, like myself, would not be offended or worried. In fact, I see it as a real positive if someone asks me. It doesn't happen, but if someone asks me to see my qualifications, I think, thank goodness you're checking this out. I've had people leave their children with me and I've just trusted that I've got a DBS. They've not actually asked to see it. In some ways that's nice because I think, you know, obviously I maybe come across as a nice person to them and they feel relaxed, and I'm glad about that. But please be checking for CRBs and DBSs. We've all got them. Any practitioner in any vein that is, you know, is working and is insured and is, you know, a member of a body will have the DBS. So please don't be afraid to ask for it. You know, and you know, before I became a therapist, I would take my daughter to classes or anything. I've never ever checked for a DBS ever, and it's only now that I know that I do check. But please do check. It's really important. Most people will even have it on their website. If you're leaving your child with someone and going somewhere, please check their qualifications and their DBS. 99.9% of people are honest and fine. There's just a tiny percentage, you know, as in anything, that might not be. So please do check that. I've even been to schools training and they've not asked to see my DBS, which again is quite scary, but I always volunteer it anyway. Sorry, I'm getting notifications. I'll just turn the sound off. Yeah, so please do just check that out. And don't feel embarrassed to ask, because if they're a decent practitioner, they will not be bothered in the slightest. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing is, I suppose, a bit about, you know, like, what is anxiety? And also, people think that for a child to be anxious, like, how would you recognise if your child is anxious? People will think, oh, well, it's just if they're like they're really stressy, or they're really oversensitive, or, you know, a child that displays massive amounts of anger might not be angry, they might be anxious, and the anger might come easier to them to mask the anxiety. So feelings will often come in later, some that we're more comfortable with doing, that just come more naturally to us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the bit that we have the issue with, that needs the work. So sometimes it's also important just to take a step back from your children and just kind of think bigger picture of like what they might be trying to communicate to you or to the world, because that's often what it's about. It's about trying to get their needs met, often in quite an unhealthy way, because they're not really sure what to do yet, or they've not quite worked it out. The other thing is with anxiety, it's not just a case of, oh, well, they're overthinking things or they're feeling really anxious. It is about their behaviour. Notice things in your child. If they start to get anxious around when you notice when they've spent a long time on their own or in their room or around friends or whatever it is, you'll notice what starts to become triggers for them. So the behaviour is important, to watch the behaviour that they display that links in with that. And also the physiological is so important. Most children that I've worked with, most children actually, I would say, unless they've done some sort of relaxation or meditation or yoga type class, probably are not that connected with what's going on in their body. So panic and fear and anxiety can feel like it comes from absolutely nowhere and it hits you like a ton of bricks. It doesn't. It's a definite, it builds up. And what's often happening is that people are not recognizing the signs and the triggers that are going on in their body. So one of the things is, does your child notice when their heart starts to race? So if you notice that they do get anxious, when they're in the throes of that anxiety, just get them to put their hand on their heart and feel how fast it is, and you feel it with them. And then it's almost like, it depends on their age, so it's difficult because there's lots of different techniques for different ages. And if you want some really specific advice, then just send us a message and I'll give you age appropriate advice. So I'm just talking generally here, but depending on how young they are, you could say, oh, how fast does that feel? Okay, what can we do now to slow it down? Let's try and do 3 big deep breaths and let's see if we can get it slower. You can kind of play with it. And the reason for doing that is to, get them to notice, because then if they get better at noticing when their heart speeds up, then maybe they can do something about it before it gets into full-blown panic and anxiety. Because as I was saying before, if their heart rate's slower and they slow that down through their breathing, they're not going to feel anxious anymore. It's just going to go. So physiologically, what's happening when someone is anxious? They're in fight or flight. Now, I won't go into loads of detail. Most people will know what fight or flight is. If you don't, I'll put a link in the top of this, actually, and I'll put it in the comments. Did a couple of videos a long time ago. I've not listened to them for ages, so I don't know exactly what's in there, but I'm pretty sure that I explain fight or flight in there and how to explain it to children. So you just sign up for our newsletter and you get a video in your inbox, and then I think the next day you get another one. I think there's 2. But basically, cut a long story short, we're going into fight or flight, so our adrenaline levels are rising. When our adrenaline levels rise, stress hormone, cortisol, also rises. So then you get messages in your brain that you basically are in danger and you need to basically be on massive alert. So your body's producing this adrenaline to get you ready literally to run away or to fight. So what can happen is we'll have like a base level of adrenaline. If your child is going through stressful things, maybe there's a divorce, maybe they've got exams at school. Now, these are all things that can't be helped. I've spoke to so many parents who have separated and feel so guilty about the fact that they've separated. Separation is part of life for a lot of people. None of us know what's round the corner, and we can only do our best. And sometimes our best is to end a relationship if it's not working. So things will happen in our child's life. We can't protect them and avoid every eventuality that's not in this perfect world, because that isn't really preparing them for the future either. You wouldn't want your children to feel that actually you stay in a negative relationship because you don't break it up. So these are all really good life lessons, but ultimately they're going to come with feelings and they're going to come with a level of stress. So they're going to be sadness, there's loss attached. That's normal. Okay, so it's not about trying to avoid those feelings, but it's how we manage them and how we deal with them. And kids don't often know how to express it, understandably. So let's just say they have got something stressful going on at that time. What you need to be mindful of is what will happen when we've got stress externally affecting us in our lives and a little bit of a build-up. Your base level of adrenaline will probably go up because you've been in fight or flight a little bit more often. So your kind of base level will increase. So you'll be naturally producing more over a prolonged period of time. Children that have experienced severe trauma in their early years, for example, may have a really high baseline. So how that's kind of displayed in everyday sort of behaviour is, say something will bother your child, their sibling taking a toy off them, or someone at school saying something to them, something that might bother them, that will make their adrenaline levels spike slightly, but then they'll soothe themselves and they'll come back down. What happens if their baseline's high anyway? It literally takes nothing, hardly, to peak up to that, because their levels are high anyway. So that's why we need to be, in times of stress, taking more time out to talk to them, to help soothe them, to do things that we think will help bring that baseline of adrenaline down. And again, there'll be more things in that video if you want to get that, or I can give you some specific examples, maybe age appropriate if you send me a message. So it's really focusing on bringing those levels of adrenaline back down so that the fight or flight isn't kicking in at the tiniest little thing. You say no to your child and all of a sudden the world's going to end. That's fight or flight. That's not them trying to be awkward. That's not them trying to be a pain in the arse. That is their adrenaline levels probably up here and they're just ready to go. So it's really about bringing that down. You might know yourself if you feel anxious or stressed, kind of feels a bit like we're regressing, going quite young in our head, because we're kind of hitting all the feeling areas, which will take us a bit younger. So with your children, it's the same thing. If they're regressing, they might start talking in a bit of a baby voice. They, I don't know, might, when they're trying to soothe themselves, want to play with toys, or, you know, luckily my daughter's not listening to this, she would kill me, but if she's ill or unwell and she regresses slightly, she'll want to watch like programs that she watched when she was 3, now she's 9. But that's just what she wants to soothe her, so that's okay. You know, so it's at times of stress and things like that, although we want to see them as emotionally developing at a really even pace that they should be, you know, when it's this stress or if they're anxious, please just let them regress. You know, it's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's not a sign that they're a baby or they're not developing right. What they'll do is they'll just go back and recycle stuff. If they need to, and sometimes that soothing includes them kind of regressing a little bit, that's fine. You can encourage them to regress. So, you know, if you think about when we've got a tiny baby, our job is to help them soothe, to learn to soothe themselves. And then as they get a bit older, they can soothe themselves, and we help them, we support them, but they will do the majority of that themselves. So if you feel that they're anxious or getting stressed, in your head, kind of think to yourself, right at this moment, if they're anxious, they might be much younger in their head than 9, for example. So put them in a nice bath with Johnson's smelly. I sometimes buy the purple, I don't know what, that Johnson's baby, that I used to love the smell of it. It's like a bit like Parma violets. And it was quite a soothing, I think it's lavender, soothing smell. You know, if my daughter was stressed, I would do her a really nice bath, and I'd sit with her and I'd play a little bit, or because that's how we learn to soothe ourselves. So sometimes when our children get anxious and get so into fight or flight on a regular basis, they maybe just need a little reminder of how to soothe themselves. Don't worry about taking that right back. Bath before bed is brilliant. Even if they're 12, 13, 14, encourage them to have a bath before bed if they're anxious. Okay, so what else was somebody asked? Other things like getting outside, going on a walk. I know it's hard sometimes, particularly teenagers, to get them to go out on a walk, or, you know, a bit easier with younger children, but think about it as grounding. So this, again, going back to what I said right at the beginning, we're focusing on being more relaxed rather than focusing on being less anxious, because that is a trap almost. It's a trick. How are we going to be less anxious? Oh, I don't know. Of course you don't, because if you did, you wouldn't get into an anxious state in the first place, because you'd stop it early on. But actually, most of us know how we can at least attempt to relax more. So it's about grounding yourself as well. So when people become anxious and when children become anxious, it usually comes along with some quite irrational thinking, overthinking, you know, overwhelming feelings. So it can sometimes feel like, almost a bit like you're on another planet. I mean, you might know this yourself as well. I know when I'm getting anxious because I'll go in a room and I've forgotten what I want. And sometimes that's because I'm hormonal, but other times it's because I'm anxious and I'm stressed and I'm not taking enough time. So I'm kind of like floating through my day as if I'm not actually there. And the more often that you do that without stopping and checking in and grounding yourself, it can kind of build and build. I don't know if you've kind of, you know, even if you've got a cold and you're in bed for 3 days, that thing of, oh, I'm getting cabin fever, that's really the feeling of not being grounded. We're like craving some connection with the outside world. So again, get your children to go out. It's about getting them to get back in touch with their senses. So play like an extended game of I Spy with them. Go on a walk. Right, okay. Pick out 4 things that you can see, you know, from here that I might be able to guess. Let's walk here, and for the next 30 seconds, let's see what we can notice under the soles of our shoes. Can you feel anything digging in? Well, yeah, I can feel the pavement. Oh, and I think I just felt a twig or a thing. So the sensations and a feeling. Then for another minute of walking, say, right, let's see who can pick something out first that we can smell. So, you know, can you smell the grass? Can you smell the leaves? It smells wet. It smells. So getting them to get in touch with their senses. Again, other ways that even for adults, I find if I feel anxious, actually just to suck on a mint that's quite strong tasting can also ground you. It's getting in touch with those senses and bringing you back into the here and now. You know, sometimes I think parents may find it slightly frustrating when we say it's about relaxation. So it's saying my connection's weak, so apologies if it is. And it almost sounds a little bit too simple to be true. And when someone's so anxious, it's kind of like, oh, how is that going to help? You don't understand how bad I feel. But actually, you've nothing to lose by improving that relaxation. And I can tell you, I have tried everything. I've been on the tablets. I have read self-help books. I've been to therapy. I've been to different types of therapy. I've trained as a therapist. What else have I done? I've done everything. I've been to meditation, and actually, as much as I tried to fight it for very long, that being more relaxed is not going to take this away. This is not something I have control over. I am an anxious person. This is just what happens. Do you know what? Being relaxed, learning to say no, and this is also really crucial for you to teach your children that it's okay for them to say no to stuff. They don't have to go along with everything. That it does make a difference, but unfortunately it's not a quick fix, and none of this is a quick fix. You know, anxiety builds up over a long period of time. It just gets exasperated with certain stress in our lives, so with exams and things like that, it make it 10 times worse, but it's probably been bubbling away underneath for longer than that. So we can't just suddenly change it in the space of a week. You know, it takes time. Which again then takes me on to another question actually that was being asked yesterday. You know, should young children have therapy? It really depends on your child. I think the youngest child I've seen was about 10. I don't tend to go any younger than that. The reason being is they've got to have a certain level of emotional literacy and ability to communicate, for me, that is worthwhile. Now, I could sit with a 5-year-old and it would certainly do them no harm, and I could certainly help build their self-esteem and things like that. It would be a positive experience, but it's a slow burner. And so that's actually partly why myself and Jackie set up Parent Plus, because I would much rather work with the parent. And that's not because I think the parent is damaging the child or it's the parent's fault that the child's anxious, but that parent's with that child 24/7. And actually, if your child is anxious, it's horrible, it's scary. And, you know, actually, if you've got the tools to deal with it in a different way, or you know how at least you can help in some way, it's much more empowering for the parent, for the child, and for the family. So I'm not saying young children shouldn't have therapy, but what I am saying is I think it really needs to be a whole family affair. I think it needs to be everybody involved, school as well, you know, any kind of caregivers basically, so that child, it has to be a sort of unified front really. Yeah, so that was that. So I don't agree or disagree with young children having therapy, but I would say in my experience it can be more beneficial for the parent to get the support so that the parent can be building self-esteem with that child every day. You know, it's great working with children, it's great seeing them develop and come on, but we've only got an hour at most with them a week, you know, and it's costly. You know, therapy costs a lot of money. And it's not, you know, a parent would come to me, I wouldn't say, oh, it'll take six sessions. You know, in a way, it's not even ethical to go there with 6 sessions for a child, because you don't want to be opening cans of worms that then they're off on their own, because it takes a long time. You know, it takes them a long time to get their head around it. So I would much rather support the parent through that. So if you are looking for help for your child, consider what support you can get, and for techniques for you to learn. You know, I know that when my child is anxious or stressed, that I have 2 ways of reacting. In a very calm, rational, non-anxious way myself, putting into practice everything that I've learned and everything that I know, and separating myself out from that. And that works well. There's the other side to me when I'm stressed or she catches me in the middle of something, where I go into anxiety because she's anxious, because I go into my own experience of how horrendous it is. And like most parents, you know, it's not something I would wish on my worst enemy, so I certainly don't want it for my daughter. So I then jump into lots of assumptions of actually how she's feeling. When she's expressing to me that she's stressed, if I'm not in the right place in my head, I can go into a complete spiral of, oh my God, she's anxious. What if she's anxious for the rest of her life? She can't possibly go through all of that. It's awful. What have I done to her? This has got to be my fault because I'm the one that's been anxious. And I can go into complete and utter overwhelm, assuming I know everything about her anxiety, when actually I don't know anything about it. And no matter what, her experience of it is not going to be the same as mine, because we're two different people with two different life experiences. So I suppose the reason I'm telling you that is just be mindful of your own process. And, you know, also be mindful of the fact that being a parent is bloody hard work. And I'm pretty sure none of you would change it. But at the same time, be kind to yourself. You know, you're going to say things, you're going to do things. If your child is anxious, I tell you now, you're going to do things at times that will make it worse, partly because you probably feel anxious. But for the most part, you'll get it spot on, because you intuitively know what your child needs and what they want, and you'll do a great job of that. I've no doubt that you will. So, again, like the whole, you know, focus on being more calm rather than less anxious. Again, focus on what you're doing that's great and do more of it. Don't get caught up in what you've not done. Why is my child anxious? You know, you could sit there for hours on end rationalising why they're anxious, why they're acting in that way. You don't know that's the answer. The only person that truly knows that is that child, and they may not fully understand that, so they may not be able to verbalise that to you, depending on what age they are. And actually, as they're older, they might not want to verbalise that to you, because they might not want to upset you or worry you or whatever it is. It's not because they don't like you necessarily, or they don't feel they can talk to you, but kids, you know yourself with your parents, you don't want to worry them, you don't want to upset them, so you won't always tell them everything. So, you know, just be mindful of your own process in all of it, and make sure that you get support and help that you need, because it is hard work seeing your children not just sail through life. But that's normal, because none of us just sail through life. There's things that push our buttons. Some kids hate exams, some kids love exams, you know. Some kids love being in a group, some kids prefer to have that one special friend that's their best friend and, you know, stay with them. Everybody's different, so, you know, don't worry too much about overanalyzing it, really. Just get the support that you think that you need or that might help you, and take it as it comes, but don't overthink it. There was another thing I was going to mention as well, because when you feel that your child is anxious or that there's something that's an issue with your child in that way, it can feel quite isolating. Like, why my child? Why is my child stressed and anxious? Like, what is it that I've done? Well, I suppose what I want to say about that is I've worked with a lot of children and a lot of adults. Just because a child might not appear typically anxious, they might not display, you know, the signs that we assume of anxiety, like on edge, jittery, fidgeting, you know, getting upset, or whatever it is. There might be a child that comes across as massively confident and look as if they've got really high self-esteem, but they get angry, they've got issues with anger. They may have those issues with anger because they're anxious and they don't recognise it, or they don't know how to deal with it. So kind of why I'm saying that to you is, don't assume that you're alone in all of this. Actually, the chances are that you're not. You know, I saw a post yesterday in a group, and the amount of responses to that post of other people who'd felt that their children were anxious and that they needed help. And I think that's great that people share and, you know, support each other, because at some stage in our lives, most of us are going to go through a period where we feel stressed and anxious and overwhelmed. Now, it is unfortunate that children seem to be under, I feel, a heck of a lot of pressure these days. I mean, it drives me bonkers. I wrote a blog the other day about homework. I hate homework. It just causes so much tension and stress in our house. And it just feels like a heck of a lot of pressure, but we need to conform and we need to go along with school. I mean, we don't always conform. If she's absolutely shattered and we've been away for the weekend, I'll write a note and say we've not done it. You know, I even did a little confession in my blog to say I've done it myself before now, and just let her copy it out, because it's just not worth the stress of it. Now, that sounds really naughty, but, you know, it's about balance, and I think often at the moment in our society we don't get that balance right. So of course it's scary for kids and it's overwhelming, but again, it's just about the messages that we're giving to them, that it's understandable that you feel a little bit stressed at the moment. You've got all that work and it's a lot. You know, let's try and do our best with it, but we're not going to break our backs doing it. You know, it's giving them the message that it's okay to feel stretched in the environment that they're in, and that that's normal, and that you empathise and understand. You know, give examples of your life, and well, when I'm at work and I've got all this to do, and you know, sometimes I can feel like I'm confused and I don't know what's going on, and it's because I've got too much. So what I do is I write a list and I do that, and you know, just show them how you manage it, so that this is part of them managing it. And one of the last things that I want to say is, again, having experienced severe anxiety myself, and a lot of people, knowing a lot of people that have, please don't see it as a life sentence. If your child is diagnosed with having anxiety, or you think they're anxious, please don't think that that is it. That is the way that they are always going to be, and that's going to be carried around with them for the rest of their lives. It might annoy you me saying this, but there will be some stuff in that experience of them feeling anxious that will set them in such good stead in their future. You know, a lot of my success in my adult life now is partly down to that anxiety. For one, I would never have trained as a psychotherapist if I've not been anxious. I mean, at the time, I would have rather had my legs chopped off, and I don't say that lightly. Honestly, I would. It's all part and parcel of that journey and that experience of life. So, you know, and it will change. I say this all the time. The only constant is change. Your child's ability to deal with situations, ability to deal with their emotions is going to change over time. They're going to grow and they're going to develop. So I know it's difficult because you don't want anything like that for your child. But please don't be thinking that that's it. Because if you're coming from a place of thinking, oh God, they're going to be anxious, they're always going to be anxious, they will sense that and they will start to write themselves off as being anxious. That's why I hate diagnosis. I mean, I know a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists, I've worked with quite a few, and have this kind of little bit of a debate really, that I hate diagnosis in a way. I mean, I know that it's necessary and I know that in some situations it's helpful. But for example, I've worked with young people who have been through a service. I'm not, you know, I won't say where or whatever, or what service, because I don't want to badmouth any services, because I do believe that everybody works hard and they can only do what they can do in terms of what tools they're given or what funding they've got. But I've had, you know, young people come to me and they say, oh, well, I've been diagnosed with such and such. And I'm sat there thinking, why? Like, based on what? I've had, for example, a young person who was being tested for bipolar by a service, and had to fill in a questionnaire, and I couldn't understand why they were being tested for bipolar, because the way they presented to me, because they then came privately to me, wasn't presenting as bipolar. I don't understand that. I'm confused. Like, they must have their reasons. And then a few weeks later, this young person said, I've not got bipolar, but now they're testing me for something else. I think OCD or something else, which is completely different to bipolar. So it's like, so how now are they testing you for that? I don't get it. So it was like this relentless kind of process of getting some diagnosis. And actually, you know, when I'm working with a child, all I'm interested in is how they present and how I can help them feel better day to day. Sounds awful, but I couldn't care less what the diagnosis is, because that's just a title and a name. But actually, it's about how they present and what they need day in, day out, which is, again, why I'm such an advocate of the parents getting the support. Okay, your child gets a diagnosis. Great. Then what? What do you do then? You know, actually, it's just about having tools and skills day in, day out for you to deal with it at home when the shit hits the fan and you're stressed and they're stressed and you're not sure what to do. So that's it. I feel like I've rambled on for a long time. I've not had any questions, but if anyone has got any questions, please do feel free to let me know. I'm just having a little look on my list if there's anything else I was asked. Oh yeah, the other thing, when you've got excess adrenaline, you're feeling really anxious, sometimes just a change in movement, or, you know, when kids feel anxious, so not all, but some might feel like they want to be in bed or they want to retreat and hibernate. Actually, it's probably the worst thing they can do. You need to get them out and about and just exercising, just a brisk walk. Again, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself now, not too much exercise because you don't want the adrenaline levels building up, but it's always like thinking, you know, when they're toddlers and you say, oh, you know, I'm going to tire them out, I'm going to take them to the play centre and let them burn off all their energy so that they sleep well tonight. Again, it's kind of like that. Let them burn some of that anxiety off. I've had it where I've been that anxious, I've not wanted to go outside. So it could be pouring down with rain outside. I've put my hood up and I've been at my mum's because, again, I've regressed and I've wanted to be with my mum. So I've gone outside in the pouring down rain with my hood up, tears streaming down my face, and I've just forced myself to walk around that block 2 or 3 times. And I've done it in the dark because I don't want anyone to see me and I don't want to feel like I want to be near anyone. But actually just that shift and that change in energy is really helpful. And I think the mistake some people can make is, oh, well, they're not up to it because they're really upset and overwhelmed and they don't want to be outside. Put the hood up. Go out when it's dark. Go out when it's raining. Great, even more. That'll really get your senses going. Don't feel like you have to wait until they're more calm in order to do some stuff, because it's kind of like a bit backwards, but I think we do tend to do, oh, well, I'll do some exercise when I feel a bit better, or I'll do that when I feel a bit better. Do it now. Do it now. You're not going to feel any worse for it, so just do it now. Diet, caffeine. I mean, I probably don't need to tell you any of this, but energy drinks are a massive no-no. Coke, Diet Coke. Caffeine is bad. Like, caffeine is literally like liquid anxiety. Plenty of water. Dehydration can feel like anxiety because your heart starts beating faster. So, like for adults, if you drink alcohol and you're anxious, your body's getting rid of the alcohol out of your system, so your heart's beating faster. It's the same if you're a bit dehydrated. Your heart's going to have to work a bit faster because it's not got the fuel that it needs. So if a child is not drinking enough water or cordial or whatever, then the heart might beat faster and they may misunderstand that as being anxious. And that can then sometimes feed the anxiety. So just little things really, just to think about, just tiny little everyday things that can make a difference. I had a client once actually come to me who was really anxious and I'd like to say made a massive difference to their lives by coming to see me, but actually just got them to cut out caffeine, and it just made a huge difference to how they felt. Now that's not going to be for everybody, but it certainly helps and it's part of it. So still not got any questions. Everybody's very quiet. Are you still there, Jackie Jones? Gone a bit flushed. So do please ask questions. This is what we're here for. Want to share stuff with you. And as I said before, there's a link at the top, I'll put it in the comments, but if you sign up to our newsletter, we'll let you know when we're going live. Whenever we write a blog, we tend to send it through there, or if we've got anything that we want to share with you. So just do that. If you sign up, then we can make sure we keep you posted, really. That's about it. I'll see how long I've been on. 43 minutes. Yikes. Right, I'll leave you in peace. Oh, you've been driving and listening, Jackie. Is that safe? Don't leave me. Okay, yeah, we're not advocating live Facebooking whilst driving, Jackie Jones. Okay, I'm just checking. Yeah, no, I haven't got any questions. Earphones. All right, I'll let you off. Kind of. Still not focusing though, are you? Actually, it's just popped up and reminded me, actually, speaking to Jackie, that if your child is anxious or you're anxious, make sure you surround yourself with nice people that are understanding and that are not going to try and fix you, but are equally not going to dismiss you. They don't have to have been really anxious to understand. Just people, oh, it was happened, but you can watch the Brits. Don't really like watching stuff like that, to be honest. I don't know why, just sometimes I find it a bit boring. I watched Little Mix at the beginning, I like that. But yeah, I might go and watch it and see. It makes me want to drink though, Catherine, when I watch something like that. It's the music, I feel like I should be going out, and I won't be going out. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. I can't believe we've been on for so long. It's gone very quick, that. I can ramble on, though. So please do share our page with your friends and anyone at all that's got children. We've got another page, Shift Happens, which is just for adults. For people that want to make changes in their life. It might be a relationship, it might be that you work for yourself and you need a kick up the backside because you're procrastinating, or you're not as successful as what you'd like to be and something's stopping you. So we've got a page that's just for adults as well, and it's not anything to do with parenting, so you don't have to be a parent to go on there. So do share the love, please, people, and let us know if there's anything else you want us to cover. As I say, sign up and get those other 2 videos of anxiety. If you've got any specific questions, just send us a message and we'll get back to you. We're usually able to get back pretty quick. And yeah, so hopefully I'll see you next time, and thank you very much for joining me. Bye.